Isn't that beautiful music we have tonight?
Yes.
Thank you. What a lovely sound, and what a glorious opportunity to praise God in a new and fresh way. And I was inspired. I was inspired by you as I was preparing my words for tonight, waiting to hear all this beautiful jazz music. And it led me to want to open up by sharing with all of you the words of an old jazz song that I just love. It goes like this. Now out of the night, new as the dawn into the light, this child, innocent child, soft as a fawn, this child is born. One small heart, one pair of eyes, one work of art. Here in my arms, here he lies, trusting and warm, blessed this morn, a child is born. Merry Christmas, everyone. You see, this, all of this, us together, those words, this music, it's the heart of what Christmas is. I mean, God is great, and the universe is wide. And you know what? Our lives, they're packed with so much joy and so much struggle, kind of all mixed together, such that it's sometimes difficult to tell which way is up. And yet, tangled up right there in the middle is this thread. It's a thread of love. It's a love that is so deep and so abiding that, you know what, it couldn't help but jump right into the middle of all of this with us, placing this great love right there into our very hands. A child is born. That child is Jesus. Jesus, who is God, come to be with us. Now, Jesus could have just skipped the messiness of it all. Might have been safer, right? But Jesus chose this very path, the path of love. Because at the end of it all, love means walking with us, alongside of us. Jesus could have chosen any time, any place to jump into being one of us, with us. Because you know what? Jesus is God, after all. So why choose a specific time? And why that time? Why that particular place, you might ask? Well, let's face it. The peoples where Jesus chose to be born, they were people who had been waiting a long, long time. They knew already about that thread of love that ran underneath it all, was always there for them and with them. They knew this from the stories of their ancestors. And you know what? They had held out a hope for hundreds of years, a hope for a wonderful counselor who would shine a light of love into this world, a light that would shine even more brightly and just tip all the balance from struggle into endless peace. But that time that Jesus chose, it was not an easy time or an easy place to become a tiny, vulnerable human. You see, there was an empire. There was an empire that was keen to stay in control, so keen to stay in control that it hauled families like Mary and Joseph's family away from their homes, no matter how inconvenient the timing was. But this is what Jesus chose. And you know what? It meant a lot to this family. It meant a lot to this people. It meant a lot to the time and to the place. It meant everything that Jesus had come as the prince who didn't choose a palace, but a stable. Now, Mary and Joseph were just ordinary people. They were not powerful. They were not blessed with tons of resources or influence. Joseph was a craftsman, and Mary was his young bride. They may have been poor, but more likely they had a home, a workshop. They were settled in a town, and I'm sure they had an extended family. Yet they were also ordinary enough to be subject to the whims of all of those forces that were just outside of their control. Forces that would uproot them and send them off to be refugees for a time. And it was right there into the arms of this family that Jesus came. Now, that says a lot about what this love is that God sends to us and chooses to be with us in. And you know what else says something? The lack of fanfare about this birth. Now, that emperor who hauled Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem had made proclamations that claimed that he was divine. And those proclamations had been cast out across all of the lands that he controlled through his armies. Yet here's the one true God actually arriving on the scene, the one who is truly divine, and choosing to arrive with little, if any, notice, and hardly any demand for recognition whatsoever. It's like he's just quietly slipping into our human existence, soft like a fawn. I mean, it's true. Both Mary and Joseph had been given heads up by angels, each of them. They alone knew how precious this little babe was that had been entrusted into their care. But clearly no one else around them had a clue. Because you know what, if you found out that God was coming to visit, wouldn't you make a room available for God? Yeah, I would, that's for sure. And the other thing is that with all of the descendants of the line of David gathered right there in Bethlehem, you would think that there would be plenty of important people there waiting to receive this momentous news, had Jesus decided that he was going to go public with it all. The thread of love come to tangle itself up in our human existence, you know what? It announces its presence in other ways. In fact, in all of the places that we humans tend to overlook. That angel of the Lord and those heavenly hosts, well, they appear not in the important places. They appear to a group of shepherds living out in the hills, keeping watch over flocks of sheep. Now, I don't know if any of you have met any modern day shepherds. Not a lot of them running around in Santa Cruz County, right? But you know what? I have. Actually, had a bunch of them living nearby me for a couple of years. Not here in Africa, but you know what's interesting? All of the shepherds that I knew, they were young teen boys or pre-teen boys, kind of right in that middle spot. And you know what? They barely bathed. They had little need for social graces. I describe them as scruffy, cheeky kids. But you know what? Those scruffy, cheeky kids, they would jump at the chance to meet this child, born to be our Savior. They were exactly the kind of welcome party that Jesus chose. That's who Jesus wants to celebrate, his coming to be with us among. So, here's a good question. Why not today? Why not us? Well, interestingly, that's in fact the very heart of Christmas, isn't it? Because God is great, and the universe is wide. And yet Jesus chooses to come into the ordinariness of human existence with a single, simple fanfare. It goes like this. See, I am bringing you good news of great joy for all people. Not just this people or those people, but all people. God's love, it is not in fact limited to one time or to a single place. Blessed this morn, for Christ, the child of God, is born for us today also. That thread of love, it extends into our own ordinariness too. Because here in our arms today is God being born among us, still trusting, still fragile, still warm, and still here to bring us this love of God. Now, I have to say, it's not an easy time or place to become a tiny, vulnerable human either, is it? I mean, we have emperors acting like gods. We have them out there throwing their weight around with devastating effects. There's proclamations of love and peace breaking into our existence, but you know what? They are still just as easily overshadowed amidst the global reach of our modern megaphones. And you know what? That's why we're here tonight, isn't it? Because we need to come together to see and to sing and to proclaim together, joy to the world, the Lord is come. This child is born for us too, for you and for me and for all of us. Jesus, who is God with us, could have just skipped the messiness of it all. Might have been safer. But no, Jesus chose this path of love. Because love means walking with us in this very ordinary and crazy time and place too. God's heart is here. In all of the places that don't get the fanfare, shining like the brightest of lights. So, how do we respond to that kind of amazing love? Well, I want to start by offering the words of Willa Gaffney. She writes, "It's into this life that brown baby Jesus comes to dwell, inhabit, teach, guide, and accompany, heal, forgive, redeem, love, and live. And thus are we too called, dwell, living, loving, forgiving, healing, accompanying each other in our own pilgrim journeys together." This Christmas, God's love is born anew in us. So the real question is, what do we do with this good news of great joy? How do we respond to this gift? That's the real question that we need to answer today, isn't it? Now, I think we all know that there are lots and lots of answers to that question. There are lots and lots of ways that we can live and love and forgive and heal. In fact, it can look different for each of us because we all have our own unique callings in this. And we all know that Christmas comes every year because God's love is always coming into our world in new ways. But what about 2022? What about 2022 is so special that Jesus still chooses to be here with us? And how exactly is the thread of love pulling on each of us to act today? Well, did you know that for the first time, the Oxford Dictionary allowed the public to vote on its word of the year? And the winner, chosen by the court of public opinion, is, anyone know? No one? It's goblin mode.
What?
Goblin mode. All right. Let's dig into this a little bit. I know, crazy, right? That's a word. Actually, it sounds like it's two words, but they called it the word of the year. The official definition of goblin mode is a type of behavior which is unapologetically self-indulgent, lazy, slovenly greedy, typically in a way that rejects social norms or expectations. You kind of get the picture, right?
Yeah.
Goblin mode. Now, goblin mode is pretty much the polar opposite of the kind of love that God in Jesus shows us and teaches us to follow, right? Why'd we pick it? Well, look around us, and it does still seem like the world is awash with goblin mode. Don't you think? Now, a hip and flippant term makes it easy to write all of that off. It's just a whole bunch of people who are out there acting badly. We can shake our fingers at it, sigh. But columnist Adam Sternberg challenges us to look with eyes that, are a little bit more honest about what's really going on here with all of us. He called 2022 the year that we lost it. Why? Well, because it's year 3 and we're still going through a lot. We didn't think we would be, but yet we are. We are still going through changes. Now, it's not the crisis kind of changes that we could just easily all pull together around, right? It's the confusing and the chaotic kind of changes. The kind that just start to feel like compounding evidence that the world, well, it's never really feels like it's going to go back to the way that it was. And it's the kind of changes that still give us the sense that there isn't yet an idea of what we might be becoming either. And you know what all of that is? That's uncertainty that has left us feeling frustrated and angry. Hence, the goblin mode consensus. It's not just something that those people are doing. It's an admission of our own levels of fear 3 years after navigating so much ongoing and continuous change. So instead of just waggling his finger at us, Sternberg engages some collective understanding. Hey, he says, this anger is telling us something that we need to listen to. It's telling us all that what we've been through is real. And that this anger is real, and that we need something through all of that. We need to engage ourselves in some compassion, some empathy. We need help forgiving ourselves and forgiving each other so that we can start to figure out a path forward. Well, I got news for you. Because it's Christmas, and I can't say it better than our presiding bishop, Michael Curry, who reminded us in his own Christmas address, Jesus came. Jesus came to show us how to live reconciled with God and with each other. And he taught us that the way to do this is God's way of love. For God's way of love is God's way of life. It's our hope for our families, our communities, our societies. Indeed, it is our hope for the whole world. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, and love came down at Christmas. Yeah, our life, it may be packed with so much joy and struggle all bundled together, such that it is often difficult to tell which way is up. That's why the Christ child is born for us, chose us here and now to be with us as one of us. God's with us in all of our tiny, vulnerable humanness. That's a tiny, vulnerable humanness that we all started out in and that we all continue to be a part of. It's one small heart, the heart of God, walking with us through all of our own fear and frustration, anxiety, and even our anger. And it's because of this great good news that we too can choose. We can choose to pick up that thread of love, to knit it into our own ordinary lives in this time and this place. We can choose to walk out of here tonight, renewed in our compassion for ourselves and for each other and for our world. We can go out into the world this night, reminded of our call to love like God loved us, with forgiveness and healing for all, because that's the heart of Christmas. Now out of the night into the light, this child is born here in our arms. Blessed is this morn. A child is born. Merry Christmas to us all.